Hey y'all, I hope you're having a good day today. I know here where I am in Florida, because of all of these storms in the Gulf that keep traveling up, and praying for all of you who it is affecting, by the way, for sure. The wind has just been blowing like crazy. And so whenever I'm sitting out here and I'm studying God's word and I'm looking out at the wind, or even when I go outside and just feel the wind, I'm reminded of when Jesus calms the storm. And you may be going through a storm in your life, or there's some storms that may be coming. And these verses I want to share with you are just always how God's word is alive and active, and it's just so good for different stages in your life. And a lot of times he reveals different things to you. Well, I'm just going to touch bases on some things that he revealed to me today. And remember, I am no theologian or Bible scholar. I'm just a girl who loves Jesus. So let me read with you for you in Mark 4, verses 35 through 41. So listen to this about Jesus calms the storm, and then I'm going to share with you some insight that I got today, and even some commentary from, of course, Dr. Tony Evans that I just love going to. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, I want you to remember some of this. I want you to listen closely, because when I come back to it, you're going to get even more revelation, hopefully like I did. Jesus said to the disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. People just couldn't get enough of Jesus. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Imagine how you're feeling. I know, being a fisherman and a boater, and in that family, we have surely seen our times of some rough seas, and my husband definitely has, that I'm grateful that he is alive today. Continuing on in verse 38, Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the waves. "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" The disciples were absolutely terrified. "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and the waves obey him." So here's some insight that I got from each little verse. In verse 35, when it said, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross over to the other side of the lake. You know, it was Jesus. He was the one that recommended that they got into the boat. And remember, nothing takes Jesus by surprise. I mean, he's God's son. He knows what's going to be happening. So, but he chose to get in that boat anyhow. So nothing was going to take him by surprise. He knew what was going to happen, just like he knows what's going to be happening in your life. Nothing takes God by surprise. So he's the one who recommended that they get in to the boat. In verse 36, so they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although the other boats followed him. I went, sometimes you just need to get away from the crowds. Don't you though? You need to just spend some time alone. And some of us may have realized that we live a quarantine life without even realizing we did through all of this quarantine seasons that we've had. But sometimes you just got to get away, whether it's your family needs to get away or you need to get away. But notice that those other boats, they followed because they just couldn't get enough of Jesus. And that's how I just pray that I always will be. I just can't get enough of him. And I just want to keep going and following him. In verse 37, it said, but soon a fierce storm came up and high waves were breaking into the boat and it began to fill with water. I felt, the waves, when I was doing some research on the Sea of Galilee, that's where they were, it said that the waves can get up to 6 feet in a fierce storm on the Sea of Galilee. And you've got to remember that most of these disciples that were on this boat, they're fishermen. They're fishermen. And I'm thinking about my man, before we even go on a fishing trip or just on a boat ride to go get some lunch somewhere, he's looking at the weather. Now, thank the Lord, now we got all these apps and everything, but even if you're on a sea of Galilee and you can look out and maybe see how the clouds may be forming or where the wind may be shifting, and you might realize whether you should or shouldn't get on that boat. So these seasoned fishermen, they got on that boat anyhow, and everything must have looked fine for them up ahead. So thinking about a fierce storm, even on this Sea of Galilee, which where I live, and my men love to go gator hunting. So recently we were over near Lake Kissimmee. So if you pull on a map, Lake Kissimmee, and how far and wide it is, you look at the Sea of Galilee, that's kind of a comparison. Even though the Sea of Galilee is more of a pear kind of shape, and the Lake Kissimmee has a lot of just different fingers off, it's about the same type of consistency. In verse 38, Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. He's just chilling out and everybody else is freaking out. The disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" In verse 38, I wrote down that he wasn't bothered. He's at peace with all of this. We're the ones that's frantically freaking out over our situation. And God is in control. He's wanting you to just find some peace in him. I said that they questioned, "Don't you care?" When clearly, out of anyone that has ever walked this earth, Jesus cares. And then I put some little stars by this one. When I said that this indicated, when I thought about how most of these men were fishermen on the boat, and they know how to maneuver in a boat in the storm or check out the weather. I said this indicates to me that this storm came completely by surprise to them. Have you been whacked lately by a complete surprise in your life, a storm that has hit, whether it is a true storm of like the hurricanes that are hitting, or a storm like my friend with her dad that's in the hospital right now with double pneumonia and COVID? Is it a storm like my precious friends that their daughter just had an accident with a skateboarding accident, and she has a serious head injury? Unexpected. So this took them by surprise, and it was beyond their control. Just like things that happen in our life, it is beyond our control. Even when Mother Nature comes, we can prepare, but the storm is going to do what it's going to do. Yet all along, I said, Jesus was with them, and he wasn't fazed by the storm. Jesus is with you in your storm, whatever storm you're going through. It's not fazing him. He wants you to rely on him. In verse 39, it says, when Jesus woke, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. When Jesus speaks, even the waves listen. Verse 40, then they asked them, "Why are we afraid?" He said. "Do you still have no faith?" I mean, I always think about how these disciples are with him, and they have seen so many miracles that he has performed, and yet they're still, "What? Are you kidding me?" So whenever he asked, "Do you still have no faith?" Still, I thought about that word still, like, come on, are you serious? And that's probably how it is with us. Are you still not trusting me in this storm? Trust in me. I wrote down here to see Dr. Tony Evans. It says that fear and faith is what he says about Mark 4, verses 39 and 40, just a portion of it. Fear and faith, these two correspond with one another. An increase in one leads to a decrease in the others. Then it skips down, and I said, he said, not me, but it's easy to forget what Jesus did yesterday when we're going through the storm today. Kind of like the calm before the storm. You forget how the beauty was, and then bam, and all of it hit, and then all craziness breaks loose. It said, had he let him know in advance that they would make it to their destination, our faith fails only when we only allow our circumstances to override God's word. Don't let it override God's word. And then I said about verse 41 when it says the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. Even the wind and waves obey him. They were terrified. They were fearful. And that turned into a whole respect. We need to make sure that we have a fear of God, a respect for God. And don't ever underestimate Jesus because he knows what's going on. Dr. Tony Evans also said, I like this. If you fear him above all else, you'll trust his word above all else. So today I want to encourage you, whether you're in a storm right now or you reflect back on a storm that you've been in. I know the storms I've been in my life. This right here has been my saving grace. I dived into his word and I just found security and comfort and peace and love and all of that in it. And even though things may not make sense when you're in the storm, God's word is always a comfort. So remember that, and remember that if you fear him above all else, you'll trust his word above all else. He's in the boat, y'all. He's right there with you. Y'all have a beautiful day, and go back and look at Mark 4:35 through 41 on your own, and what insight do you get from that? Soak up the sun wherever you are. Take care.